Okay, so let's talk about the quadrants of a unit circle, okay? Well, what we know is obviously in the first quadrant, both are positive, both x and y are positive, right? So, if both x and y are positive, then that means that both our cosine and, I shouldn't do plus, and our sine are going to be positive, or they're going to be greater than 0, okay? Now in our second quadrant over here, we know that x is going to be negative and y is going to be positive. So cosine is going to be less than 0 because it's the it's the x coordinate, and sine is going to be greater than 0. And we can go through here. So third quadrant, both negative, so cosine and sine are going to be less than 0. Sine are less than 0. And over here, fourth quadrant, cosine is positive, sine is negative. So cosine is greater than 0, and sine is less than 0. Okay? So let's do some examples. So now let's find some measure of radians, and we're going to see where it is in the circle. Okay? So for our first example, we're going to have pi divided by 3. Well, what do we know about our circle? So let's talk about it. Well, we know that the whole circle, 360 degrees, is equal to 2 pi radians, right? And we know that half the circle, 180 degrees, is pi radians. So that means that 90 degrees is going to be equal to pi over 2 radians. So if we were to look at this here, if I were to just write these out, we have pi over 2, we have pi, and over here it is 2 pi. So looking at this, pi divided by 3, where would that lie in our circle? Well, pi over 3 is a third of pi, so it's over 0 pi, right, over 0 degrees, but it's less than half a pi. Okay, and we can guess that it goes somewhere about here. That's what that angle would look like. Now, let's look at another one. How about we have 2 pi divided by 3? And when you start getting fractions with the numbers in the numerator and denominator, you can start thinking about it as 2/3 of pi, 2/3 times pi, okay? And if we know that pi is 180 degrees, which would be 1 times pi, we know that it is going to be less than 180 degrees. But is 2/3 pi greater than 1/2 pi? Well, 1/2 pi is 50%, and 2/3 pi is about 66%. So we can guess that that angle is about here. Okay? So we can guess that that's around there. So let's talk about the Pythagorean identity. Well, we know the Pythagorean theorem, and just for a reminder, it's a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, and this applies to the sides of a right triangle. So we got c, and the legs could just be, how about a and b right here? So how can we apply this to trigonometry and unit circles? Well, if we know, I'm going to do a quick sketch of our unit circle right here. If we know that the radius is equal to 1, and we know that the legs or the sides are the y-coordinates, right? Then we know that the x-coordinate, one leg, is cosine, and the other leg is y, which here I'll write out here, y, or sine. So we know that the sum of the square of two legs is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. So 1 squared is equal to 1, and we have x squared plus y squared is equal to 1, okay? And we know that the x is cosine of theta of an angle, it's cosine squared of an angle, and we know y is sine, but it's squared, so sine squared of an angle is equal to 1, which again I said is just 1 squared, which is just 1. So we can use this Pythagorean identity to figure out what the other one is. So if we know what the sine is, we can know what the cosine is. So let's test this out. Let's say we have our sine is equal to, so sine of theta, or our angle, is equal to negative 1/2. Okay? So we know that it is between negative pi and negative pi over 2. And so you're like, okay, well, how do you get negative angles here? Well, if I were just to draw our unit circle again, that was a bad circle, let me try it one more time. Draw a circle like this, and so like I was saying, normally you'd create an angle like this, right? But sometimes you could create an angle like this, and that is a negative angle. So you measure that in negative radians, okay? So how can we figure out what our cosine is? So cosine, what is our cosine? Well, using our Pythagorean identity, so if we do cosine squared of theta plus the sine squared, which is negative 1/2 squared, which negative 1/2 squared is equal to positive 1/4. And we know that that's equal to 1. So we can subtract 1/4. So we get cosine squared of theta, or our angle, is equal to 3/4. And how can we find our cosine here? Well, we can find the square root of both sides. So we find that our cosine is equal to, remember this is equal to the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 4. So we're left with cosine is equal to the square root of 3 divided by 2. And don't forget we're the plus or minus, because that's where this comes in handy. Quadrants, like I told you about before, if we were to just get our unit circle out right here, and we draw it like that. Sorry, I'm not good at drawing circles. Remember, it's negative, right? But it's between negative pi, which would be 180 degrees, or negative 180 degrees, and negative pi over 2, which is negative 90 degrees. So we know that it is in the third quadrant, okay? So that means that both the sine and the cosine are going to be negative. So that means that we're going to take the negative option. So we know that the cosine of this angle is equal to the square root of 3 divided by 2. Hey guys, so thanks for watching. So today we learned about the basics of trigonometry. So we talked about unit circles, we talked about radians, and the Pythagorean identity. So next video we'll be talking about graphing sine, cosine, tangent, stuff like that. And we'll see how their graphs look. So, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or check out Khan Academy. And peace.